Hey everybody, welcome to a little forward for the video. Unfortunately, this one was struck down by the hand of the YouTube copyright system, so I've had to re-upload it with kind of like a faded opacity filter over most of the anime clips. So I apologize that it looks like that, but sometimes, you know, we live in a world where a big corpo like Aniplex can just look at a video and say, no. I actually wasn't going to re-upload this one just because like I didn't want to do any editing on it. But the funny thing is, the second it got blocked was when it actually started to take off a little bit in the algorithm. Like if you look at the views, they started to spike right when it got taken down. So that kind of sucks. That kind of it made me a little angry. It burned my ass a little bit at 5:30 in the morning when I got the email. So fuck it, I'm just gonna re-upload it. And I think what I'm going to do is open up a Patreon that is completely free, that has all of the videos that have been taken down, like this one, like the Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust video that got taken down, like the Dragon Ball Big Green dub video from a couple years ago that got taken down, and just put them on Patreon for free. That way you don't have to pay anything, you can just go over there and watch them, or like use a downloading website or whatever to download them. The reason why I want to do it for free and not charge anything for the videos is because I think that they should be on YouTube for free for you, but they're not, and it's not my choice. I've considered doing a Patreon before in the past, and the reason I haven't is because I have the YouTube members open on this channel, and I don't know any way of giving the members on the channel access to like the same benefits that people who would pay on Patreon would have. So I just kind of scrapped the idea way back when and never did it. But this time I'm seriously considering just having a free option so you guys can watch and download the videos that get deleted. I think I might work on it a little more. That might be something that pops up mid-October-ish, and I'll just start like linking it in videos and talking about it a little bit more. And I think if there's any sort of paid tier, all the paid tier would do would be give you access to some behind the scenes stuff like liner notes and scripts and maybe update videos. But I just wanted to talk about that a little bit, give you an explanation for why this video was only up for like 2 days and then got taken down, and now you're seeing it again in your sub feed, hopefully. I mean, hopefully you're not annoyed by it, but that's YouTube. Well, anyway, I'm gonna let the video play now and stop looking like Two-Face with my lighting that I was too lazy to set up this early in the morning. So thank you guys, I do really appreciate it. I hope y'all looking forward to all the Halloween videos that will be coming out this year. I think it'll be really fun. And yeah, let's go ahead with the Aldnoah.Zero video. Hey there everyone, and welcome back to the channel. You know, I've been talking about a lot of anime from 20 or 30 years ago lately, and I thought it might be nice to take a look at something a little bit more contemporary. Never mind the fact that Aldnoah.Zero came out 10 years ago and time means nothing anymore. Anyway, the 2010s isn't exactly known as a great time for mecha anime. Sure, there are some bangers like Iron-Blooded Orphans, but by and large that decade kinda left the genre behind for the exploding popularity of fantasy isekai, and also the dark fantasy shonen like Attack on Titan. However, there were studios out there that were still focused on telling a grand mecha story, even if they didn't always live up to the sum of their parts. Aldnoah.Zero is a 24-episode, 2-season TV anime that was originally released in summer 2014, with a manga adaptation released soon after. Aldnoah.Zero was a collaboration between studios A1 Pictures and Troika, with its world and story mostly attributed to the man behind Psycho Pass and Fate Zero, Gen Urobuchi. However, there are like 4 writers attributed to the creation of the show, and the more you dig into it, the more it becomes apparent that Aldnoah.Zero is a case of something being designed by committee. Now that can be a good or a bad thing, but I think the phrase "too many cooks in the kitchen" can be applied in a lot of cases. Aldnoah.Zero is not a terrible show by any means. In fact, I find it to be pretty entertaining. However, it does have a lot of issues that are pretty hard to ignore, from its strangely compressed timeline that only spans the course of 40-ish years, to its main character that has the personality of a piece of wood. Not to mention a mid-show cliffhanger that is pretty much immediately negated in the first 5 minutes of the next episode. Aldnoah.Zero has some weird problems that can be a little hard to overlook, but at the very least, it has incredibly good music. Seriously, the soundtrack does so much work in this show, and it's just immediately recognizable. The music was composed by Hiroyuki Sawano, which should come as no surprise because it sounds incredibly similar to the early seasons of Attack on Titan and Kill la Kill. Also, both OPs are total earworms and are really hard to skip, especially the first one by Calafina. Even if you do not like the show, you'll probably be humming this one. So anyway, let's get into the story of 2014's Aldnoah.Zero. The show begins by introducing a cavalcade of important characters with some very pompous sounding names. Most importantly among them is Princess Asseylum vs. Elucia, the young heir to the throne of Mars. Along with her is her maid, Adelrito, who I'm just going to call Adele because the dub totally slaughters her name and just basically calls her Adelritzo, which is kind of weird. There's also her Earthborn friend Slaine Troyard, a boy who's the grandson of a famous scientist. However, it doesn't take long for the show to display how Earthlings are treated by the Martians. A man named Count Croteo claims Slaine as his manservant, and when he's not looking at Slaine like a piece of garbage, he's physically beating the shit out of him with a pimp cane. On the other hand, down on Earth we're introduced to Inaho Kaiska, a student who is about to graduate high school and go on to college. Inaho is the MC of Aldnoah.Zero, and as I mentioned before, he has the personality of a piece of wet cardboard. Now, there are moments where he shows emotion, but his design is pretty flat. I mean, I look at him and I can't help but think Kirito from SAO was so popular at this time and probably influenced how he looks. Inaho has a sister named Yuki, who's a warrant officer within the UFE military. She's also a protective older sibling that just wants him to go to school. Oh yeah, we also get introduced to his gaggle of school friends, most notably Inko and Calm. There's a few others, like the guy who always comments on all the girls' asses for like all 5 lines of dialogue he has in the show, but they mostly fade into the background. The show then launches into a lore dump that highlights the first big problem that I have with the story. We are told that the Apollo space mission in the 1970s uncovered a structure on the moon called a hypergate. That was a portal that led to Mars. On Mars, the remains of an ancient civilization were found, and humanity began to colonize the Red Planet through the use of an alien technology called Aldnoah. Eventually, these colonists broke away from Earth and fought a war to succeed, which culminated in an event known as Heaven's Fall in the year 1999. Heaven's Fall resulted in widespread destruction across the Earth due to massive damage to the moon, caused by the hypergate overloading. Since then, the 2 warring planets have been in an uneasy armistice, with the Mars Orbital Knights waiting in the debris above Earth, wanting nothing more to attack and destroy their enemies. The biggest problem that I have with this setup is the fact that this verse empire arose in such a short span of time. From 1972 to 1999 is only 27 years, which feels like way too short of a time for these people to build up such a strong military with all these huge mecha and towering castles, even with magic alien technology. It really hurts the suspension of disbelief later as well when characters are talking about Terrans being a different race of inferior people, or how their family goes back to the beginning of the Empire. Like, of course it does, dude. It's been 42 years total. Your dad was probably born in fucking Detroit. They talk about verse like it's been hundreds of years, but then you see some of the knights definitely look older than the entire lifetime of their empire. It makes me wonder why they didn't just set the show in 2114. At least then it would make a little more sense. And they already have sci-fi shit that doesn't exist in 2014 anyway, so it wouldn't even really matter. I guess I should mention that one of the big reasons that Versians think they are superior is that the Aldnoah technology is only able to be utilized by people chosen by their emperor. This is because the alien tech was imprinted on Emperor Rayverse when it was discovered and is passed down to his offspring genetically. The royal family can also allow others to use Aldnoah technology, giving rise to the 37 clans of Mars Orbital Knights. One of the big draws of Aldnoah.Zero is that it portrays one side as total underdogs. The UFE and their mecha are pretty realistic, use very grounded weaponry, and they even tried to make members of the UFE faction seem like actual members of a military with call signs and designated roles. I appreciate that. You know, it seems like a silly little detail, but I always really like when they put a radio filter over everyone's voices when they're in the mechs. On the other hand, the Mars Knights use their super robot-inspired mecha that are so overpowered that they may as well be magic. Also, the mechs in this show are referred to as cataphracts, a word that was used to refer to heavily armored medieval cavalry units, and all of the UFE platoons of mechs are given designations named after breeds of horse, and I thought that was just like a neat little touch, so +1 for that. Another thing that I actually really like about Aldnoah.Zero, at least in its beginning act, is just how bleak the setting actually is. On the surface, you can't really tell. I mean, Inaho and his friends are all wearing school uniforms and talking about graduating. Everything seems totally normal. It's only when they actually arrive at school we see they're undergoing mandatory military training in the KG-6 Sleipnir Cataphract, and the school itself is completely run by the military. We meet a character named Lieutenant Koichiro Marito, a veteran of the war 15 years ago, that has PTSD and a drinking problem. We learn from Marito that the government is basically covering up the military power of the Martians, burying his report from the Heavens Fall incident, and calling him a crackpot. So Marito spends his days training children to fight in an inevitable war that he knows they have no chance of winning. So Princess Asseylum says goodbye to her friend Slaine, giving him a pendant she got from her late father. That will be important later. Asseylum wants this to be a mission of peace. She is very altruistic, to the point of being naive. So it's not really surprising that a bunch of embedded terrorists immediately try to assassinate her by blowing up her car with a rocket. This immediately spurs the Orbital Knights into action as they descend their huge landing castles to Earth and begin their military campaign to take the planet. And yes, the landing castles are really fucking cool. I mean, you're orbital striking a fucking castle, how could I not love that? The UFE counteroffensive against the landing castles goes about as well as you'd expect. Their tanks and jets can't even scratch the armor of the Martian cataphracts, and even their mechs get toasted pretty much immediately. It only gets worse for the earthlings when the Martians cut a bunch of undersea communications cables and destroy a good number of satellites. I think Inaho's reaction to seeing the missiles fly overhead kind of encapsulates how his character is for this entire show. Like, he doesn't even really react or even look surprised. And then he and his friends see Asseylum standing in the middle of the street, and she gets hit directly by a missile like someone called in a Call of Duty Predator drone strike. It was actually kind of funny. There's this orbital knight named Count Sausbaum that is working with the terrorists, and it's really obvious because he has this line when talking to Cruteo where he's like, "Oh wow, it'd be a shame if the princess died and we had to exterminate the whole planet." Yeah, he wouldn't be great at poker. Anyway, he sends his subordinate, a knight named Trilram, to destroy the military leadership in Japan and find out if Asseylum is actually dead. Trilram's first objective is meeting with the terrorists, who think that they'll be given knighthood for their work, only for Trilram to kill them in order to tie up all the loose ends. Well, he kills all of them except for one teenager named Raie, who escapes and is saved by Yuki. Marito and Yuki are the only two left that can engage Trilram, with Marito even pulling off some pretty slick moves, but all the slick moves in the world can't help you when your bullets don't even leave a mark. We get this action scene where Yuki's damaged mech is strapped to the back of a rescue APC while it speeds away from Trilram. It's a really fun action scene, and that's another strength of Aldnoah.Zero. Its action is often exciting, with interesting aspects to its mech-based combat. There's a lot of physics in the action in this show, and that's because Inaho is basically a boy wonder who can come up with a solution to every cataphract problem that they come up against once he hops into his own cockpit. Luckily, the 3D animation used on most of the mecha in this show actually looks pretty good. The movement isn't choppy, and the overall design of the UFE mechs is really interesting and cool, even if they do lack a little bit of variety. Plus, they do a really good job of blending the 3D models into the environment through the use of wear and tear on the mechs and lighting. Aldnoah.Zero really never has that 3D mecha anime problem where the robots look like big plastic toys. Well, not the UFE mechs anyway. The verse mechs, on the other hand, are a little bit more fantastical and brightly colored in their design. The main characters all get away from Trilram by going through a tunnel. Well, not all the main characters, because Okisuke climbs onto the outside of the APC to try and help Yuki and just dies. This becomes the motivation for Inaho and his friends to fight against the Martians, at least in part. It's actually Calm who seems the most affected by it. Inaho barely has a reaction, and it's not mentioned again except in passing, so it's unfortunate because it's just an obvious call to action. During their escape to the school, Inaho came across a girl who claims to be Princess Asseylum, who says that she felt sick from Earth's gravity and it was a double that was killed. Inaho tells her to keep that shit to herself for now, and she's swept up with all the other refugees, along with her attendant. The group makes it to the school with the use of some emergency tunnels, and they begin to formulate a plan to take on the Martian cataphract. The big problem that they're facing is that Trilram's mech is outfitted with a dimensional barrier, which basically just deletes all matter that it comes into contact with, hence why all their bullets don't do anything. Inaho, being the smartest person in the room at all times, figures out that there must be points on the mech that are not covered by the barrier, like the bottom of its feet, or possibly holes for cameras. They trick Trilram into walking out onto a bridge, blow it up, and dunk him in a river. This exposes the areas where water is getting through the barrier, allowing Inaho to stab him. Trilram is somehow still alive after this and is recovered by Slaine. Slaine was shocked to see that Asseylum was still alive during the battle, but Trilram spills the beans and says that they have to kill her or his family will be ruined. This causes Slaine to grab Trilram's gun and shoot him to death, as his loyalty and infatuation will always lie with Asseylum. On the Earthlings side of things, we get a little bit more development with Rye, as we find out that it was her father that was killed by Trilram, so now she wants revenge. The problem with that is she wants revenge on all Martians, calling every single one of them the enemy. It's actually kind of an interesting character trait for her, and I would love to see her journey going from an angry person struggling with the fact that her father was an assassin to a full-on member of the crew. Unfortunately, we only sort of get that. Rye really fades into the background by the second season, and while there are a couple big events involving her throughout the show, she really stands out as a missed opportunity. It's also kind of funny when Inaho and Asseylum discuss her identity and decide to keep it secret in case of spies, and Rye is literally right there. Inaho also decides to call her Salem as a nickname since they gotta call her something, and I'd like to think that's a reference to Sayla from Gundam, just as a little nod to Grandpa. Slaine returns to Count Creteo and informs him that Trilram was killed by the orbital bombardment that the Knights carried out. Slaine tries to give the Count his opinion on the matter and is beaten for it, and of course Slaine thinks that Creteo must be in on the assassination plot, but he's probably not the ringleader. This doesn't stop Slaine from asking permission to go into battle in order to avenge Asseylum, figuring that he can find out more about the plot himself. Inaho's group down on Earth meets up with the escort ship and head to a UFE base. I haven't introduced her yet, but the captain of said ship is Captain Darzana Magbarej, a no-nonsense commander that looks down on Lieutenant Marito for more than his constant day drinking. Magbarej also has this recurring interaction with her XO where she's like, "Do you know why you can't get a date?" And then her answer always somehow relates to whatever situation they're in. Maybe this came off better in the sub, but in the dubbed version, it's just kind of a weird non sequitur and it just gets sort of annoying. By the end of the show, you could make a drinking game out of it. If they're both on the screen, there is a 90% chance that she's saying it. They don't get much relief at the base though, as they're attacked by a Mars Knight with a big plasma sword. Inaho takes him out by distracting him, while Inko drops a crane on his cataphract. Good thing he just sorta stood there while Inaho tried a bunch of different ammo types. Come to think of it, it's a good thing none of these Martian mechs just have a gun. I feel like if this guy just had a big laser gun, they'd just be fucked, but where's the fun in that? We finally get a reveal of Emperor Regalia himself, and he doesn't look great. In fact, he's pretty much bedridden, but he does question the news of Asseylum's assassination, and doesn't really seem to believe that the UFE are responsible, so he orders a ceasefire until the matter can be investigated. It doesn't take long for the Emperor's opinion to be influenced by shady parties, though. Slaine does sneak into Count Cruteo's comm room and contact the Emperor with the hologram phone, and tells him that the Orbital Knights were behind the assassination of Princess Asseylum. However, Sausbaum had already figured out that Slaine lied about Trilrem's death, as one of his spies found the Knight's body full of bullet holes. Sausbaum tells Regalia not to trust Slaine, and the Emperor redeclares war on the UFE. That didn't last long. Back down on Earth, the students are all officially drafted into the UFE, and we get some backstory on Lieutenant Marito. Captain Magbarej has a personal grudge against him because her brother, a man named John Humeray, was Marito's best friend, a friend that was lost in the last war. She blames Marito for his death almost as much as he blames himself for it, and we see that his PTSD leaves him in such a state that even just trying to pilot a cataphract is impossible. The reason this all comes up is because the ship is currently heading to a place called Tanagashima, an area that was heavily damaged due to Heaven's Fall. There is currently no civilian population there, but there is a hidden UFE base. They fight off a knight named Countess Femienne, with the help of a mysterious Martian attack plane which is piloted by Slaine, who's escaped Count Cruteo's clutches between episodes. Countess Femienne's cataphract has these big rocket fists, very retro, but again I can't help but think everyone would just be dead if the Orbital Knights slapped a gun on their mech. Slaine finally talks to Inaho and asks to be escorted to Princess Asseylum, revealing that he knows she's alive. But Inaho shoots him down instead, figuring that he could be a spy and has probably outlived his usefulness. This is honestly the most interesting thing that Inaho does in the entire show. Slaine is not killed here, instead he's dragged out of the ocean by Count Cruteo's men and taken back to the landing castle to be interrogated. Cruteo tortures Slaine, who refuses to give up any information about the princess, even once Cruteo figures out that she's still alive. Slaine accuses Cruteo of treason, but it turns out that Cruteo is actually loyal to Asseylum and the royal family, and has been gathering information about the traitors. He realizes how far Slaine has gone to protect Asseylum, and decides to let him go. However, Count Sausbaum shows up just as Cruteo orders Slaine's wounds to be healed and attacks the castle, killing Count Cruteo and taking an unconscious Slaine back with him. So the reason that Sausbaum doesn't just kill Slaine is because Slaine's famous scientist father somehow saved the Count's life. They never really go into detail about it, but it ends up with Sausbaum letting Slaine go and lying to him and saying that he saved his life from Count Cruteo. He also admits to being the ringleader behind the assassination plot for some reason. I mean, he straight up tells Slaine he will try to assassinate the princess again. Sausbaum reveals that he hates the royal family because they were the ones who pushed for war 15 years ago and caused the death of his fiancée. Sausbaum says it is his duty to wage war, and the audience learns that the Verse Empire sorta just kind of sucks. Like, yeah, they've got all these big fantastical machines and this wonderful Aldnoah technology, but they have like zero agriculture. The average Martian is basically a medieval serf living through constant famine, while all the excess of society is reserved for the noble families. It's actually a pretty interesting tidbit about the Empire. They present themselves with all this pomp and circumstance, styling themselves after French and British nobles of times long past, but really all of their servants are dying because no one can figure out how to build a fucking greenhouse. Asseylum finally reveals her identity to the captain, believing that they might be able to get news of her safety to the Emperor. At the moment, they decide to wait until they can get to the UFE HQ, as they could be attacked by assassins at any time. The base in Tanagashima didn't end up being a safe refuge for long, but it did contain something that could change the tide of the war: a huge Aldnoah drive equipped warship called the Ducalion. Luckily that Asseylum just revealed her identity because she's sort of required to power up the drive. Also, if she dies, then it will turn off. This huge warship is the most powerful piece of tech that the UFE will come to have at their disposal, and it's a personal insult to Count Sausbaum, as it was meant to be helmed by his dead fiancée. With the Ducalion's ability to cross over land, Captain Magbarej decides to head to the current HQ of the UFE, located in Russia. Rye has been spiraling since they arrived at the Tanagashima base, and while it was never rare to hear her yell about all Martians being the enemy, now she's having major bouts of survivor's guilt that leave her broken and distressed. It's during one of these episodes in the ship's showers that Asseylum enters to use the adjacent stall, and we get a pretty uncomfortable scene where Rye tries to choke her to death in the shower. I don't know, I think this scene could have been done without the camera lingering on a 15-year-old this long. Plus, it's a little weird that the only fan service in the show is during an attempted murder. Inaho and the others figure out what's going on when the ship's Aldnoah drive turns off, and the ship crash lands in a northern snowfield. Luckily, Inaho and the captain burst in to save her, and Inaho uses mouth-to-mouth to resuscitate the princess. Rye grabs the captain's gun and holds them there, finally telling them that she was one of the terrorists. However, she didn't count on Inaho pulling off a fucking John Wick-style disarm on her. Where and when did this kid learn to do that? Inaho says he trusts her since they already fought together, and then hands her the gun back, and she immediately is arrested and thrown in the brig. But I guess it's fine because Asseylum actually says it's all her fault for being so naive, and then she apologizes to Rye, but it's also not a mecha anime unless someone gets thrown in the brig. When the Ducalion finally arrives at the current UFE HQ, a Soviet-era base that still has a giant hammer and sickle painted on the doors, Asseylum bids Inaho farewell in a heartfelt goodbye. The two have grown quite close during their adventure on Earth, and Asseylum promises that they'll remain connected after the war is over. She records a message for all the people of Verse, explaining everything that has happened and asking the Martian soldiers to stand down. However, Sausbaum reveals that soldiers loyal to his faction control the communications relay at the moon base, so her message won't reach anyone. He then decides to attack the UFE HQ directly with his landing castle, but not before setting Slaine free, and telling him that the debt that Sausbaum owed Slaine's father is repaid. You know, I really would have liked to know exactly what that debt was. It could have been an actual interesting piece of lore for these two, but the show leaves it unsaid. Inaho and Asseylum's goodbye won't last for long though. As Sausbaum begins his attack on the base, Inaho agrees to escort Asseylum to his landing castle. Asseylum struggles with the fact that her own men want to kill her, and helps with the war effort by turning off the Aldnoah drive inside the landing castle. Rye is freed from her cell during the attack, now wanting to help Asseylum, and she steals a cataphract with the help of Com, and then gives the princess a ride to the Ducalion. The ship then fights its way out of the base, which is really just kind of a lost cause because these military guys really can't do anything without Inaho around. Like at one point, Yuki yells at Inaho and tells him to stop coming up with plans on his own, but his plans are the only thing that ever work. Admittedly, his plan here is really cool. They use the Ducalion to go all the way up into space and then orbital drop cataphracts directly onto the landing castle to bypass its defenses. Inside one of the dropping cats is Princess Asseylum, and the plan goes pretty well until Sausbaum shows up personally and attacks the Ducalion, causing it to drift towards the Earth. Captain Magbarej won't be taken down that easily though, and aims the ship directly at the castle, ramming it from orbit. After this, Yuki has to replace the knocked out pilot of Asseylum's cataphract, relying on Inaho to hold off Count Sausbaum while they finish the mission. Sazbomb's cataphract, the Dioscuria, is pretty cool. He controls these drones that can return to him and form into a full-size mech, plus he has a dimensional barrier similar to Trilram. Slaine, meanwhile, has escaped the castle and flies around in his attack craft for a while, but the battle is too hectic and eventually he's damaged and forced to land. Slaine makes it to Count Croteo's old cataphract, the Tharsis, and hops in the cockpit. Somehow, the mech's Aldnoah drive powers on. Sazbomb has gone into a rage, which allows Inaho to get the upper hand on him and damage the Dioscuria. Inaho is about to land the killing blow on the traitorous Count when Slaine flies in and tackles him out of the way. At the same moment, Asseylum is successful in her objective and turns off the castle's drive. She then returns to the site of Inaho's battle to check on him and is shot multiple times by Sazbomb. Slaine is right there, and this is where his character just starts to come across as really fucking dumb. I have no idea why he would, 1, save Sazbomb from Inaho, and then 2, be surprised that Sazbomb still wants to kill the princess, like he told you that. Slaine freaks out and shoots Sazbomb a bunch in the chest and then turns his gun on an injured Inaho. Inaho does pull a gun on him, but Slaine is too quick and blasts the main character right in the fucking head. Yeah, that's a pretty big thing to end your first season on, huh? The main character's dead, all his friends are in a losing battle, and even though the princess was successful, she's shot in front of her 2 love interests and ultimately accomplishes nothing. And I would give it to Aldnoah.Zero real credit for having the balls to flip the status quo on its head like that for its second season, but the show makes probably the dumbest decision that it could have made and basically undoes everything interesting about episode 12's ending. Season 2 begins with the reveal that Slaine Troyard is now an orbital knight in command of Count Croteo's old cataphract, the Tharsis. The war has continued for a year and a half, with UFE mechs now taking the fight to the asteroid belt around the planet. The Martian soldiers are spurred on by a speech by Princess Asseylum, but instead of the message of peace that Asseylum normally preaches, it's a call to war to exterminate the Terran menace. We get an almost immediate reveal that this is actually Asseylum's half-sister, Princess Lemrina, who was hidden away by the royal family because she's in a wheelchair. It makes the Verse Empire seem even more like the aristocratic families of old, hiding away their quote-unquote imperfect children. Slaine has an unconscious Princess Asseylum hidden away in his personal quarters in a big Bacta tank, which kinda takes his obsession to a new level, but he's also probably the only reason she's still alive. Adele also stays there to take care of her, and only a few others know of Asseylum's existence, like Lemrina. In a sort of shocking reveal, Count Sazbomb is alive, with Slaine being one of his retainers. Slaine is just pretending to be loyal here, but I really have to ask why Sazbomb would trust him. Like he didn't lose his memory after Slaine shot him, and he basically is talked into letting Slaine live because Slaine tells him that if it wasn't for him, he'd be dead. Well, yeah, no fucking shit. You shot him like 8 times and then still saved him, even though you hate him. It feels like a twist for the sake of having a twist. It definitely just kind of feels like one big ass pull, but not as big of an ass pull as Inaho being alive, having survived a point-blank headshot and coming out of it with a robot eye that makes him even more overpowered than he already was. Inaho shows up mid-battle and is even more badass than he was in Season 1. Now he has a robotic eye which contains an analytical engine that is hooked up to his brain and allows him to make even quicker technical evaluations. The downside is that it can give him migraines or even make him black out if it uses too much of his brain's processing power. We see a flashback where Yuki and Inko retrieve Inaho's body and bring him back to the Deucalion. The drive had powered down after Asseylum's apparent death, but Inaho is actually able to power it back on. At the moment, they believe that the Aldnoah activation factor was contained in Asseylum's blood that Inaho had splashed all over him. That's kinda dark, but if it works. Present-day Inaho watches Asseylum's saber-rattling broadcast and comes to the conclusion that she's a fake, because she gets the reason that the sky and the ocean are blue wrong, which is something that they had previously shared together in Season 1. With Inaho now aboard the Deucalion and piloting his signature orange Sleipnir, the ship heads towards the UFE space station called Trident Base. Just like the Earth-based bases, they are never a safe haven for our characters, as Sazbom sends squads of his knights to poke the base and test its defenses. Luckily, Inaho can use his new eye computer to hit targets from extreme range. Inaho scans the Tharsis during the battle and finally learns Slaine's name, and of course Slaine knows all about Inaho from Adele. So far, Season 2 hasn't really taken that many leaps of logic outside of everybody surviving, but it kinda jumps the shark when Sazbom names Slaine his adopted son. And then in the same episode, Slaine betrays Sazbom and kills him, telling him that he was always going to take revenge for what the Count did to Asseylum anyway. Slaine then takes Sazbom's title as Count and command of all of his men. Yeah, man, there's like no way that Slaine isn't getting assassinated within like 5 minutes of that funeral. Have you seen how racist the Martians are? They were beating the shit out of him 5 seconds ago as like a common greeting. And Slaine knows this, so he now knows that he has to do some big performative act to win all of the soldiers over to his side. There are 3 counts in particular that really don't like or trust Slaine. Counts Mizurek, Barrowcruise, and Merilzian. While they plot from the shadows over the best way to get rid of him, Mizurek heads to Earth to take some territory for the Orbital Knights. Unfortunately for him, he ends up fighting Yuki and Marito, with help from Inaho with his super eyeball. Mizurek is taken into custody by the Earth forces, even though his cataphract can manipulate gravity and is really cool. This leaves Barrowcruise and Merilzian to watch as Slaine takes on Trident Base with the Tharsis, pulling some Shar level shit and pushing back the UFE single-handedly. I guess it really helps that the Tharsis' special ability is that it can basically see the future. When he returns to the moon base, a bunch of the Martian soldiers salute him, and his enemies are like, "Oh, darn it, he's such an alpha." Yeah, the dub refers to Slaine as an alpha here. It made me laugh pretty good. Count Merilzian puts a plan into motion to depose Slaine fully, seeking an audience with the fake Asseylum without Slaine in attendance. Lemrina entertains this because throughout Season 2, she begins to resent how Slaine is kinda just using her as a tool. Though she does also go back to his side more than once, Lemrina really flip-flops on whether or not she's cool with being used to trick everyone. Mostly she just wants revenge on her family for shunning her, but she doesn't love the fact that she has to pretend to be the perfect sister in order to do it. Merilzian's big plan is to proclaim that Slaine isn't even a true Orbital Knight and didn't earn Sazbom's title, so he challenges Slaine to a duel, which everyone agrees to honor because, I mean, he kinda has a point. Count Mizurek isn't in the Terran's clutches for long, as Inaho is actually able to convince him that the current Asseylum is a fake through a few conversations. Mizurek is actually not interested in getting vengeance on Earthlings or anything like that. What he actually wants is land to cultivate in order to feed his people. Inaho and Raye then free Mizurek and give him enough supplies to return to his landing castle, on the condition that Mizurek find out what Slaine's true objective really is. Inko spots Inaho and Raye setting the Count free, which makes her suspicious and makes the audience think that maybe there'll be some like misunderstanding plot where Inaho is thought to be a traitor, but that just doesn't really happen, and this side plot just kind of fizzles pretty much immediately. That also happens with Raye's character in general. I mean, I guess she kind of had all her character development back in Season 1 when she tried to kill Asseylum, but it's just super weird that she's such a nothing character in Season 2. Also, apparently the UFE is so hard up for soldiers that they let Raye fully enlist despite almost murdering a VIP and then holding a ship's captain at gunpoint before escaping the brig and stealing a mech. But hey, we all need 5th chances, so who am I to judge? At the very least, she has had some character development, like she isn't just immediately trying to murder Count Mizurek and she's going along with the plan, so she's made some strides. It's just that they don't give her really anything to do after this besides just participate in some battles sometimes. Slaine and Merilzian have their duel in the destroyed remnants of the blown up moon, and we see that Merilzian's cataphract basically just has like bits from Gundam that he can control that fly around and shoot lasers. We are finally at the point where the Martians are just putting guns on their mechs. Too bad Merilzian gets tricked into following Slaine through a tunnel in the moon base and then ejected out into space. I kind of wonder why the Martians are never seen wearing spacesuits. I guess they feel like they're too good for it. Probably the most ridiculous thing about this duel is Inaho is down on Earth looking up at the sky and he can see their duel with his robot eye. That's some real Legolas energy right there. Lemrina thinks it's pretty funny that a Terran is gaining power within the Verse Empire, and she's a pretty huge troll, so she announces as Asseylum that she and Slaine are to be married, and they will start a new kingdom within Earth space. While everything seems to be going Slaine's way, one big wrench is thrown into his plan. The real Princess Asseylum begins to wake up. She actually makes a full recovery, and Slaine has to confront this part of himself that actually didn't really want her to wake up. Of course, he's still infatuated with her, but he allowed himself to believe that she was out of the picture and had been using her ideals in a twisted way to make his own actions acceptable. Now that she's awake, Slaine realizes that maybe trying to conquer Earth in Asseylum's name isn't really what she would want. I'm not really sure why Slaine would think that Asseylum would want him to continue the war. It makes him seem incredibly dumb. While he's coming to this realization, his right-hand man, Mr. Harklight, and the knights under him are carrying out a massive invasion campaign on Earth. Also, when Asseylum remembers who Inaho is, Slaine gets really mad and leaves, even dropping flowers on the floor. Come on, dude, you're such a little bitch. After hearing that Asseylum remembers Inaho and treasures her time with him, Slaine gifts Harklight his own cataphract and says, "There's no going back. My crush likes another boy, so now I will destroy humanity." Besides Slaine's objective and motivations being kind of stupid, we also get a little bit of dumb hostility from the UFE. Captain Magbarej is told that the Deucalion won't be integrated into the regular forces, but will continue to be used as an autonomous commando unit. The reason for this, as suspected by the captain, is that the UFE naval leadership don't trust them because they're piloting a ship made with Martian tech. Which is incredibly fucking dense, considering the Deucalion is the only ship we've ever seen get a win, along with the fact that it is completely crewed by loyal Terran soldiers besides Rye, I guess. And then, on top of that, Inaho is deployed aboard the Deucalion, and he's the smartest, chattest soldier in the whole army. Again, this wouldn't stand out as much if the entire rest of the UFE weren't basically useless, but since they are, it seems pretty petty to spurn your biggest military asset for no reason. The Deucalion is ordered to go and take back the territory that the UFE just lost to Slaine's assault, which means they have to deal with 3 orbital knights and their unique cataphracts. One can turn invisible, one has the ability to control lightning, and the final has the ability to clone itself. Count Mazurek, who has returned to his landing castle, requests an audience with Slaine and Asseylum. He gets a meeting with the fake Asseylum, but Slaine blows him off. During the meeting, he realizes that Inaho was right, and this princess is a fake, and then he fakes having difficulties with his ship so he can try to find the real princess while Slaine is away. Also, there's this scene where Lemrina is really mad that Slaine blew off the meeting and her wheelchair flips over. Why did they build these foot-wide, 3-inch deep trenches in all the hallways? While Mazurek doesn't find the real princess directly, he does run into Adelrito and hands her the good luck charm that he got from Inaho. When Asseylum recovers this, it triggers all her lost memories, so now she knows exactly what happened before she was shot. Adele fills her in on what has happened in the last 2 years, and surprisingly, Lemrina enters the room, ominously pointing a gun at Asseylum. We see Slaine lie once more and come to Lemrina about Asseylum's condition, first saying that the princess is still in a coma, and then saying that she isn't herself when he's caught in that lie. So Lemrina comes up with a plan with the real Asseylum to confront Slaine. When Slaine says he believes that the war would have been inevitable no matter what, and lies to Lemrina about Asseylum's mental state, she reveals that it's actually the real Princess Asseylum using the hologram tool to look like Lemrina. All this time, Slaine has been scheming, and he fell for his own trick. Lemrina and Asseylum attempt to take Slaine into custody, but the soldiers listen to him instead, and he takes them both captive once again. Slaine has one headache after another as he's informed that the son of the late Count Curteo, Clonkay, is headed there to give him a visit. The Deucalion has successfully stymied the advance of the orbital Knights on Earth, mostly due to Inaho and his computer brain being able to figure out each knight's weakness in turn. With that success, they're ordered to head up into space to spearhead an operation called Luna Gate, in which they'll attack the Martian moon base and Slaine's landing castle, which is in close orbit. As the Deucalion attacks Slaine's castle, he's in the middle of a meeting with Clonkay, who is incredibly loyal to the Emperor and asks if Slaine had Regalia's permission to found his new kingdom. The entire UFE attack on the moon base ends up being a distraction so that an assault team can sneak aboard the castle and assassinate Asseylum. Luckily, Captain Magbarej has grown increasingly suspicious of the Admiralty, and Inaho is sent into the castle on foot to locate and extract the real princess, because this assault team doesn't give a shit if it's the fake princess or real one, and they don't really know the difference anyway. Of course, Inaho gets into a gunfight with Slaine in the hangar, but before either one of them can get a good shot in, the assault team arrives. Slaine gets distracted and attacks the UFE team in the Tharsis, allowing Inaho to slip away and finally find Asseylum right before passing out. Yeah, apparently using your supercomputer eye to generate a 3D map of the castle was a bit too much. But it's okay because the eye can literally take over his body while he's in a coma and tell Asseylum to make it to a particular hangar to get rescued by Inko. They at least get a sweet scene where they sort of confess their feelings for each other, but on Inaho's side, it's kind of like an AI co-pilot outing him. Asseylum makes it to the airlock, but it isn't Inko that saves her. It's none other than Clonkay Curteo. Say that name 5 times fast. Slaine begs Asseylum to come back to the landing castle over the radio, but she basically tells him no and that he needs to stop the war, but he's pretty much beyond listening to anyone at this point. Clonkay and Asseylum then arrive at Mazurek's landing castle to hide. She tries to use his hologram comm device to contact her grandfather and get him to stop the war, but he's on his deathbed and hallucinating, so that's a no-go. Inaho escapes and is filled in on what happened by his eye. He does have to undergo emergency surgery, and the doctor tells him that if he uses that system to that extent again, well, there's going to be dire consequences. When the Deucalion is told to spearhead a final assault on the moon base, Inaho argues with Yuki that he has to go out and fight. I get she's the big sister trope, but what does she expect Inaho to do? Just be like, nah, I'm gonna sit this one out, military, no thanks. Inaho now has the Sleipnir Final Showdown custom, which does look pretty awesome. As the battle for the Shattered Moon begins, Slaine calls for all his allied knights to attack, only to be interrupted by Asseylum. The Emperor has died, and Asseylum announces that she is the new Empress of Verse, and is taking Clonkay as her husband. With no Imperial reinforcements incoming, Slaine's loyal men fight to the death defending a moon base that their count has set to self-destruct. Of course, the show cannot end without a battle between the two rivals, Slaine and Inaho. At the very least, the melee battle between these two here at the end is really entertaining and has great music, even if Slaine is being super melodramatic the entire time. Inaho manages to grapple the Tharsis, and the two fall through the atmosphere and crash into the ocean. This time when Slaine awakens on the shore, he's face to face with Inaho pointing a gun at him, and has no other choice but to surrender, bringing the war between Mars and Earth to a close. Probably the funniest part about the whole outcome is that they pin the entire assassination plot on Slaine, and then the UFE keeps him prisoner underground in a glass cube like Hannibal Lecter. I think I'm supposed to feel bad for him at the end as he watches a bird fly outside his window, but I just don't. And that, everybody, was the story of Aldnoah.Zero, more or less. You know, I really do appreciate what this show was trying to do at the time, a military mecha sci-fi in the early 2010s with a fleshed out setting. It definitely had potential. Unfortunately, I really don't think that Aldnoah.Zero lives up to that potential, just because the characters and general story fall a little flat. Honestly, if they had stuck with the ending of season 1 with most of the main characters being killed off, the show would have been way more memorable. Characters like Marito, Rae, and Lemrina have a lot of potential to have really great character arcs, but fall to the wayside for this rivalry between Slaine and Inaho that never really feels realistic to begin with. At the very least, the action in Aldnoah.Zero is good and entertaining, with a great soundtrack accompanying it. So let me know down below if you've seen Aldnoah.Zero, what your thoughts are on the series, and I'll see you again next time. Hello everybody and welcome in to today's end card. As always, let me start by thanking my channel members, aka Batosai, Argent, Griever, Azure, Windress, Brian Sanchez, Chris Goodnow, Daniel Johnson, Dane O'Connor, Grim07, Harmonious, Hidden Insanity, Jessica Solberg, Jay Lamb, Joe Castellanos, Joe Cavazos, Johnny G, Canto 20, McLean Nugent, The Crawl, Trey Hardy, The Twisted Mentat, and Zappa Slave. Oh, and Zach Jones too. Don't forget Zach Jones. And I gotta move this over. Okay, there we go. Hold on, we're doing this live. Fuck it, we'll do it live. Okay, anyway, thank you guys so much for sticking around while it takes me a month to make these goddamn hour-long anime videos. There's good news though. Next week we will be uploading a review of the 80s incredibly violent show Angel Cop, because I have wanted to get some 80s OVAs under my belts, but then behind the scenes I have been working very hard for what is coming up for October this year, which is 5 reviews of horror / 80s anime type beat things that you will see. There will be a announcement video like with the schedule coming out probably in the middle of next week, so keep a lookout for that. But yeah, October this year on the channel, we're gonna do a little bit of a horror anime celebration, so I hope everyone's excited. As far as like this video and Aldnoah.Zero, you know, I'd seen this show one time back in like 2015 and thought it was pretty okay. I think I like it a little bit less now that I've seen so much other mecha anime, but it's not terrible. It just like the story has a lot of weird stuff that happens in it that doesn't make a lot of sense, and Slaine, just overall the worst thing about it is Slaine is not a good villain, and season 2 just totally fucks up the whole like actual good ending of season 1. Like season 2 could have been really interesting if they actually stuck with everyone being dead, but you can only complain about that so long before it doesn't matter anymore. So thank you guys, I hope you enjoyed watching. Oh yeah, also if you want to go over to the gaming channel, the Let's Play channel linked down below in the description, we are playing through Super Robot Wars Y, which is really fun. I just finished up a playthrough of Pokemon Yellow, which people seem to enjoy, and we're doing like Paper Mario and one of the Gears of War Reloaded over there, so it's a good time. Anyway, thank you guys, I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and I will see you again soon. Have a good night.